My magazine, called Collateral, consists of 3 pages: my front cover, contents page and double page spread. My magazine is the rock/metal genre, so I produced magazines that were in the same genre and mediated the codes and conventions from these magazines. For example, Kerrang and Big Cheese. I denoted these into my magazine and to make sure all my magazine pages looked professional and to hope that it was a realistic magazine that people would actually like to read. For my magazine, I followed most of the codes and conventions from Pastiche and Kerrang and Big Cheese. The reason why I picked these magazines to Pastiche was because it was the same genre of music which I'll be making my magazine about and the music taste that I like. I use these magazines to get my codes and conventions and try not to challenge them too much. The first thing I'll talk about is my masthead. This, much like both Kerrang and Big Cheese, has a big sans serif style font as well as some kind of design much like Kerrang's with the rough edges which connotes rebellion. Also, the masthead connotes rock and roll with a kind of design as big and bold is something that connotes standing out and being loud, which is something that's stereotypically connoted and denoted about my target audience. Another important thing about my masthead is the name itself. Collateral tends to mean something that is accidentally damaged or something that was damaged while trying to damage something else. I think this has a strong connotation to my genre of music and my target audience, considering that they are stereotypically a bit crazy and enjoy causing problems, so I think that this is mediated quite well. Above the masthead I have a cover line stating some of the content that will be included in the magazine. This is much like Big Cheese because they do the same thing on their magazine. It's something that I think look good when transferred over to my magazine. The cover line has the name of bands like Linkin Park, Rise Against and so on, and these are going to be bands that will be featured in my magazine and have a story which is a convention that is included in a lot of rock magazines. Moving on to the house style and colour scheme of the magazine, I used a font which was quite bold and sans serif style, which would be the font that I would use for all my pages and cover lines. I think that this font has a good impact to it and looks pretty cool, and both of these things are important to my target audience and suits it considering that my target audience is males around the age of 20. If this was a magazine aimed towards a younger audience or maybe a female audience, I don't think that this kind of font would work very well and something that I wouldn't use. The colour scheme for a magazine is blue, yellow and black. These colours are ones that generally people wouldn't think of together, so this connotes rebellion, which is something that is stereotypically linked in with my target audience. I prestiged these colours from Big Cheese, considering that they had the same colour scheme on the front cover of their magazine. All these things that I added will create the preferred reading said by Stuart Hall in 1980, since this will be something that my target audience will want and something that will attract them to my magazine more than some others in the market. However, I did have a hard time choosing my model, as it had to be someone who would fit into the idea of being an ideal self or an ideal partner, said by Carl Rogers in 1980. There are some special cases where music magazines like Kerrang will go for something different with their main cover image, where it's not a direct gaze or even an ideal self or ideal partner in most people's opinions, but again, I didn't feel like this would be a good idea for my magazine. The camera angle for my main cover image is a close-up, which is something that can sometimes be a challenge stereotype, since Kerrang and other magazines that are in the same genre have their shot type as a mid shot. However, I think my magazine works and the connotations of this kind of shot type is serious, but also with the kind of pose and face that I made him pull, it also makes it look relaxed and laid back, which is something that is quite strongly related to the rockers and the genre of music. Another convention that I added to my front cover was the cover lines. Cover lines are needed in every magazine in order to show what content is in the magazine and more importantly what is the best parts of the magazine that people will want to read. With the placement of my cover lines, I made sure that they were all on the left hand side of the page. This is so that when they're in any kind of store on a shelf, people will be able to see the cover lines before actually picking up the magazine, as it would be behind other magazines. I think this is really good for people who are interested in buying the magazine or interested in the same kind of genre that I'm doing. This is very similar to how Big Cheese and Kerrang do their magazines and place their cover lines, as they do the same thing. However, they do also have content on the right hand side of the page and probably other content all over the page. The next thing, which I think is one of the more important conventions that I chose to have on my magazine, and is also something that is on most magazines, is the plug at the top right corner. Usually music magazines will have something like this so that people will have another reason to buy the magazine. I also feel like they are benefiting themselves by buying the magazine. Especially with my plug, considering that the prize is a ticket to download, which is something that my target audience would love and enjoy having, considering that it's one of the biggest concerts and festivals of the year. This is very similar to something like Kerrang would have, as Kerrang would also give away something like tickets or posters in their magazine to the audience and people buying the magazine. Usually there will be text outlining what the prize is and it will be anchored to a graphic, which is what happens in most magazines, so I decided to put it in my magazine as well. The next convention I added was the main cover line. This will show the main story in the magazine and also what people will probably want to see the most. It is always anchored to the main cover image, and this is the same case for every other magazine that I've read, e.g. Kerrang or Big. In my case, it's an exclusive interview with the lead singer of the band I made up called Styx. I also had a pull quote in the masthead saying rock and roll is a life for me. This links into my target audience as rockers want to become stars and it's the kind of thing they wish for, and I think they will like. Another representation that I added to my cover line was the burn-in effect that I added. This makes it like a cigarette burn which connotes coolness and something that's stereotypically linked in with rockers. This isn't like much I've seen on either Kerrang or Big Cheese, so this actually may be seen as a challenge convention. The next convention that I added to my magazine was the barcode. The barcode is a convention that's on 100% of magazines. Much like Kerrang, I made my barcode hold all the information about the magazine, things like issue number, date of release, pricing and things like that. This appears on most barcodes on Kerrang as it is easy for the reader to collect them and know which issue they have, which is good for my target audience as considering that they would be more likely to collect Kerrang or some kind of rock magazine. The final convention that I added to my front cover was the cover line at the bottom of the page. This holds a lot of extra content that will be in the magazine and doesn't necessarily need its own banner, but it is also important to the reader as they want to know as much as they can about the magazine before they buy it. When it came to designing my contents page, I solely chose Kerrang to pastiche as I thought they had the best looking contents page out of the other magazines that I looked at. The first thing that I know I wanted for my contents page was the main image at the top. This kind of image in this position is something that Kerrang has in a lot of their magazines. I think it's really good and helps denote what the main story is of the magazine and helps reinforce it from the cover. This is one of the two ways that Kerrang has their contents page laid out. They will have a big image at the top with the text underneath, or an image on the left with text on the right and underneath it. The next convention I added into the magazine was the letter from the editor. This is something that again can be found in almost every Kerrang magazine, as it's something which I think is really good in the magazine, as it connotes some sort of personal feel to the magazine, as if it's especially made for the reader, which is something that I personally really like in magazines, and something that I think my target audience will also like. The next thing I chose was a style for my subheadings and what I wanted them to say. For these I basically copied Kerrang since it looked really good, only I made mine much bigger with more impact, as I thought it would be something my target audience would like. Looking at Kerrang's, they have theirs smaller because they have a lot more content to fit onto their magazines as they have been going for a long time, whereas I don't have as much content, so I thought making them big would be more suited to my magazine. The final convention I added to my contents page was the little symbols next to some of the stories saying how they were from the front cover. Kerrang has these as well, showing that what the important stories are and what the stories that the people who are reading the magazine will most likely want to read. When it comes to my double page spread, there are a lot of conventions to be taken into account. The first one I would be adding was the layout of the text. In all music magazines, the text in double page spread will be in columns known as a body copy, as it's easy to read and looks professional. So it would be best for my magazine to have this body copy since it looks good and the layout is easy to read. All DPS spreads are different when it comes to the kind of content and what the article is about. For mine specifically, it is an interview with the lead singer of my band, so I added some things which isn't really in other magazines and is more of a challenge convention, and that is a subheading above each body of the text. I added these because I think it makes it look a lot better, and also because it makes it easy for the reader to pick and choose what they really want to read. Looking at something like Kerrang, you can see that this is usually not in their magazines and something that they try to avoid, but I think it looked a lot better in my magazine and something that I think I'll keep. The next convention I added to my magazine was the 2 pull quotes. While this may seem like a challenge convention compared to other magazines, since other DPSs only have 1 pull quote, I did this because most bands in other magazines are famous worldwide. However, compared to my band that I'm doing, since they're a new band, I thought it would be a good idea to have 2 pull quotes so people feel like they know more about the band. The next convention is the slug in the top left corner. This is important as it lets the reader see what part of the magazine they are on. This is almost on all pages of Kerrang magazines, and is always on the double page spread. The next convention I added was with the image. The image I added would be similar to the main cover image on the front cover, in the sense that it is direct gaze. However, in terms of the shot type, it is very different to the cover. The picture on the cover is a long shot. This is so the whole band is visible, and we can see their identity and what they are like. A lot of Kerrang double page spreads will have long shots on their DPS. However, they don't always have this kind of shot. It does vary. However, it is important for my magazine, as it's a new band. Seeing all of them is important as it connotes their rising fame. The next convention is the credits at the bottom right of the image. This is on almost every double page spread as it tells the reader what exactly is happening in the image and how it came to be. The final convention I added to my DPS was a change of house style. By this I mean the DPS in the magazine, like the Kerrang, will have a different colour scheme and font compared to the rest of the magazine. This connotes the importance of the article by the fact that it deserves its own house. This is something that I think my target audience will understand and like when it comes to the article itself. The kind of fonts that I used were ones that strongly connoted the rock. For example, the font that I used, called 28 Days Later, is a very jagged and rough, which is something that connotes rock music and something that my target audience will like. Also, this kind of sans serif style font stands out and is easy to read, which is mediated by me.